Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside, I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. The Municipal Archives of Eldridge Hall was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant Art Deco halls, polished marble, priceless books, every scholar and patron playing their refined role. Then, the respected head librarian, Reginald Thorpe, was found dead, brutally struck with his own paperweight in the rare books room. Police called it a simple burglary gone wrong, a missing manuscript, a forced window. But Hercule Poirot saw something else entirely, a carefully rehearsed performance. Someone in this theatre of wealth and knowledge was playing the most dangerous role of all, the role of the innocent, the role of the murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The Municipal Archives of Eldridge Hall stood as the perfect stage for tragedy on that crisp autumn evening in 1938. Elegant Art Deco lines rose in geometric splendour against the darkening English countryside, its polished marble facade gleaming softly under wrought-iron gas lamps. Every arch and chevron spoke of refined modernity meeting quiet tradition. Inside the grand reading room, the scene unfolded with theatrical precision. High ceilings featured intricate plasterwork in sunburst patterns, and while crystal chandeliers tinkled faintly in the draught from an open terrace door. Long mahogany tables glowed under soft lamplight, their surfaces polished to a mirror sheen. The air carried the rich scent of old leather bindings mixed with fresh hothouse lilies arranged in sleek vases and the faint, comforting aroma of strong continental coffee from the nearby staff pantry. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard stood near the body, his rough tweed coat a stark contrast to the surrounding elegance. Nasty business, Poirot. Reginald Thorpe, the head librarian, was alone here after hours cataloguing a new acquisition. Killed with his own brass paperweight, blunt force to the temple. A side window was jimmied from outside, and a valuable illuminated manuscript is missing. Looks like a straightforward burglary gone wrong. Hercule Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, his green eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction as he surveyed the carefully arranged scene. He adjusted his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, small hands gesturing expressively. Observe, mon ami, this room is no mere repository of books. It is a stage, carefully lit, every prop in its proper place. The victim reclines in his chair as if interrupted mid-performance. Yet the blood has dried in a pattern suggesting he was struck while seated and facing his desk. A burglar entering from the window would have approached from behind, non? The body of Reginald Thorpe presented a study in composed contrast. His silk waistcoat remained almost immaculate, save for the dark stain at the temple. Crisp linen cuffs were still neatly buttoned. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat cold on the desk, its bitter scent lingering in the warm drawing-room air. Footsteps echoed sharply on the parquet floor as constables moved about their duties, but Poirot noted that the heavy velvet curtains framing the tall windows hung almost undisturbed, save for one panel. You watch with Poirot, non? The forced window shows fresh scratches, yes, but the glass fragments lie mostly outside. Curious behaviour for an intruder breaking in. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve with precision. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed softly, its rich tone measured and solemn against the crackle of a distant fire. The cast of characters had already begun to assemble in the adjacent drawing room, summoned hastily by the police. First came Miss Evelyn Hart, then the assistant librarian, a slender woman in a champagne-coloured silk evening gown that rustled softly as she moved. Her hands twisted a crisp linen napkin, and the delicate floral notes of Worth perfume wafted around her. Next entered Mr. Charles Langley, the wealthy patron and chairman of the Archives Board. His rough tweed jacket seemed out of place, and the scent of fine Cuban cigar smoke clung to him. Mrs. Amelia Thorpe, the victim's elegant widow, arrived draped in black velvet, though the mourning attire appeared freshly donned. A subtle sandalwood cologne clung to her. Dr. Simon Vale, the consulting archivist and longtime family friend, fidgeted with soft kid gloves. Finally, young Miss Clara Voss, the junior cataloguer, hovered near the fireplace, her face pale in the fire's warm glow. Poirot moved among them like a director surveying his newly assembled troupe. Mesdames et messieurs, the stage is set for tragedy, yet the play has only just begun. Each of you has a role this evening. Some will play grief, others will play shock, and one among you, perhaps, will play the part rehearsed long in secret. Miss Hart dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Poor Mr. Thorpe, he was so dedicated, always working late on the rare collections. Her voice trembled with appropriate emotion, yet her shoulders shook with mechanical precision. Watch this performance carefully. Is it truth or theatre? The mask slips. Did you catch it? Her hands tremble, but not from sorrow. Perhaps from something sharper. Mr. Langley puffed on his cigar, the rich smoke curling lazily toward the chandelier. Terrible loss. With that manuscript was worth a small fortune. Thorpe and I argued about security measures only last week. His tone carried the weight of authority, but his eyes carefully avoided the widow's gaze. Ask yourself, why does he mention the argument so quickly? Consider the psychology. What role does this man need to play? The concerned patron, or the man who stands to gain? Mrs. Amelia Thorpe accepted a glass of icy champagne from a silver tray. Her fingers remained steady on the smooth crystal, despite the chill night air drifting in from the terrace. My husband lived for these archives. Who would do such a thing? The cold raised faint gooseflesh on her arms, which she ignored. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth. Dr. Simon Vale cleared his throat, the sound echoing off the polished mahogany panels. I was here earlier this evening for tea. Everything seemed perfectly normal at the time. His rough tweed sleeves brushed against the velvet settee as he sat down. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Miss Clara Voss stood quietly by the fireplace, the comforting warmth of the flames contrasting with the chill terrace beyond. She said little, but her gaze flicked repeatedly toward the closed door of the rare books room. You see, but you do not observe the performance. Hercule Poirot is not deceived by such theatre. Poirot arranged a few scattered objects on a side table with symmetrical precision. Pens, a small notepad, an ashtray. His small hands moved with order and method. The psychology, it is everything. Greed performing as concern, fear performing as willing cooperation, love performing as indifference. The heavy oak doors had been secured. The crystal chandeliers continued their soft tinkling. The scent of hothouse lilies and leather bindings still hung in the air, now mixed with the faint bitterness of cold coffee and the lingering trace of cigar smoke. The stage was set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players' formal interviews unfolded one by one in the wood-panelled study adjoining the grand reading room. Soft Art Deco wall sconces cast a warm golden glow over the scene, while the faint scent of furniture wax mingled with lingering wood smoke from the drawing-room fire. Distant piano music drifted through the halls from a forgotten gramophone, its notes soft and melancholic against the occasional soft closing of doors. Poirot directed the first scene with quiet authority. Miss Evelyn Hart sat on a velvet-upholstered chair, her champagne silk gown rustling gently as she crossed her legs. The delicate floral notes of her Worth perfume filled the small space. Mr. Thorpe was like a father to me, she said, her voice carefully modulated. I admired his passion for the preservation of rare books above all else. Her performance of loyal devotion flowed smoothly, yet she avoided Poirot's sharp green eyes whenever the missing manuscript was mentioned. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice how she speaks of admiration rather than affection. Ask yourself, why does she avoid his eyes precisely when the loss of that valuable psalter arises? Next, Mr. Charles Langley entered with heavy footsteps on the parquet floor. He immediately lit another Cuban cigar, the rich tobacco scent cutting through the room like a stage curtain. I funded much of the new wing, you know. Thorpe understood my expectations for security. We clashed from time to time, yes, but always as colleagues. His alibi was a dinner in London, verified, yet with a suspicious 2-hour gap. Observe this actor closely. He plays the generous patron with such confidence, but observe the eyes. Where is the genuine regret? This performance, it is rehearsed. Truth does not rehearse. Mrs. Amelia Thorpe followed, her black velvet gown absorbing the light. She sipped a sweet liqueur from a smooth crystal glass, the taste turning slightly bitter on her tongue despite its advertised sweetness. Reginald and I had our differences in private, but in public we always presented a united front. The archives were his entire life. Her hands, encased in soft kid gloves, remained composed, yet a faint tremor appeared when Poirot gently inquired about her husband's will. The mask slips. Did you catch it? Greed performing as dignified grief. If you were hiding guilt, how would you perform the role of the innocent widow? Dr. Simon Vale's scene revealed a man of science attempting to play the helpful family friend. I examined the body briefly at the scene. Classic blunt force trauma. The absence of the manuscript clearly points to theft as the motive. His sandalwood cologne mixed pleasantly with the hot coffee Poirot had ordered brought in. His alibi placed him working late in the adjacent conservation laboratory. Watch how readily he offers his expertise. Too perfect, too polished. The psychology reveals the role he desperately needs to perform, to appear utterly indispensable. Though young Miss Clara Voss entered last. Her footsteps were light and hesitant on the polished floor. She wore a simple, rough tweed skirt that contrasted sharply with the silk cushions. I left the archives at 6 o'clock sharp, she said quietly. Mr. Thorpe stayed behind to finish cataloguing the new acquisition. He seemed distracted that evening. Her voice caught with what appeared to be genuine emotion on the final word, the only real slip of feeling witnessed so far. Bravo! But the performance, it was not entirely convincing. This one plays the innocent junior assistant. Yet innocent players do not let their gaze drift so often toward hidden doors and locked cabinets. Contradictions began to surface like missed cues in a poorly rehearsed play. Miss Hart claimed she had seen Mr. Langley leave the premises quite early, but Langley insisted he had departed well after her. Mrs. Thorpe casually mentioned a recent heated argument over finances, which Dr. Vale denied having witnessed at all. The missing 15th century illuminated psalter seemed to link directly to a private collector whom Langley had contacted only days earlier. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, his green eyes gleaming with interest. Each player enters the stage with their lines carefully prepared, yet the theatre, it has a way of exposing the forgotten cues. You watch with Poirot, no? The hands that tremble ever so slightly reveal far more than the words that flow so easily. The air in the study grew warmer from the nearby fire, yet a chill draught still slipped in from the cold terrace beyond the velvet curtains. The scent of expensive perfume lingered alongside the rich aroma of cigar smoke and the faint bitterness of strong coffee. Crisp linen napkins lay folded on a side table, untouched. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his hands. The psychology, it is everything in this drama. One actor performs loyalty while hiding ambition. Another performs concern while nursing resentment. A third performs grief while tasting relief. The interviews concluded as the grandfather clock chimed again, its measured tones echoing through the elegant halls. Footsteps faded along the parquet corridors. The crystal chandelier in the distance continued its soft tinkling. Every actor had taken their mark. But who played truth and who performed lies? Chapter 3. The First Act. Deeper investigation carried Poirot and Inspector Japp through the quieter backstage corridors of Eldridge Hall. Cold marble floors gave way to warmer drawing rooms, where the scent of furniture wax blended with lingering wood smoke from the fireplace. Rain pattered steadily against the tall windows, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant crackle of burning logs and the soft rustle of silk as someone passed in the hallway. A mask slipped during the careful re-examination of the victim's desk. Poirot discovered a partially burned letter hidden among the ashes in the fireplace. The singed paper, addressed to Reginald Thorpe, hinted at a secret financial arrangement involving the missing illuminated manuscript. The handwriting bore a striking resemblance to notes taken by young Miss Clara Voss. Now yet when questioned again, she denied any knowledge of the letter. The first revelation, mon ami. Someone attempted to destroy evidence after the fact. The performance of complete ignorance begins to crumble before our eyes. The director method. The performance. Miss Evelyn Hart wept convincingly when confronted with the burned letter fragment. Her handkerchief dabbed at her eyes with delicate precision, and her shoulders shook with appropriate sorrow. The tell. But observe, the handkerchief remained almost completely dry. The mascara did not run. The performance of grief was technically perfect. Too perfect. The psychology. I am reminded of the Ackroyd affair, where a man performed shock so convincingly that even I, Hercule Poirot, was momentarily deceived. He had rehearsed in front of mirrors for hours, practicing the widening of the eyes, the sudden dropping of the jaw, the exact tone of breathless surprise. But he made one fatal error. When the news was delivered, he reached for his cigarette case with hands that were far too steady. A man truly shocked does not possess such steady hands. The body, it knows the truth even when the face tells the most polished lie. This is what the little grey cells understand, the psychology beneath the performance. In that case, the actor forgot that genuine emotion always disrupts order and method. Here, Miss Hart's dry eyes and controlled gestures betray that she knew of the letter's contents long before the police arrived. Humans wear masks to survive the roles society forces upon them. Yet the small inconsistencies, the steady hand, the dry cloth, and the perfectly timed sob reveal the actor struggling beneath the costume. 138 words. The truth. Therefore, this woman possessed knowledge of the letter before anyone should have. Her grief is mere costume, not genuine feeling. You see it now, no? The theatre begins to crumble. Reflection. In this elegant theatre of archives and rare books, we witness how humans wear masks not only to deceive others, but often to deceive themselves. Miss Hart performs perfect loyalty to her late mentor, yet the burned letter suggests a deeper complicity in whatever scheme surrounded the valuable manuscript. Why do we cloak our ambitions and fears in the respectable garb of scholarly dedication? Greed frequently performs as passionate preservation. Fear of exposure masquerades as innocent confusion or helpful cooperation. I recall the case of the Veiled Lady, where a woman performed the role of grieving widow with such flawless artistry that her entire entourage believed her loss was complete and devastating. She attended memorial services with perfectly timed tears, arranged flowers with trembling hands, scented with Chanel No. 5, and spoke of her husband with just the right mixture of sorrow and fondness. Yet Poirot noticed one telling detail. She never once touched the dead man's favourite meerschaum pipe, claiming it was too painful a reminder. In truth, she had poisoned him months earlier for the insurance money and had rehearsed her widow's role night after night in the privacy of her boudoir. Her mask slipped only when she was offered a handkerchief scented with his favourite cologne. She recoiled not from cherished memory, but from the sharp scent of her own guilt, the body. It betrays what the rehearsing mind tries so desperately to script. 142 words. Universally, deception thrives because society demands performances from all of us, the loyal employee, the devoted spouse, the helpful colleague, the innocent bystander. Yet truth has a stubborn habit of emerging in the unguarded moments, a fleeting glance, a hand that remains too steady, an eye that stays too dry. The theatrical wisdom for you, dear listener, is this. Watch not only the grand, sweeping gestures meant to impress, but the small, quiet failures where the actor forgets their lines under pressure. In the grand halls of Eldridge Hall, The first act has now concluded. Some masks had cracked. More would surely shatter when the spotlight of truth grew brighter, and the rain continued its soft drumming on the windows. The fire crackled warmly in the grate, casting dancing shadows across polished mahogany and velvet curtains. The scent of hothouse lilies and strong coffee still lingered, now mixed with the faint bitterness of burned paper. Poirot arranged 3 pens on the desk into perfect symmetry, his small hands moving with deliberate order and method. "The psychology, it is everything," he murmured. "And in this drama, the actors are beginning to forget their carefully prepared lines." The first mask cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. Poirot began to apply gentle but relentless pressure on each suspect, turning the elegant drawing room into a series of tense private scenes. The warm air felt heavier now, thick with the scent of furniture wax, fading hothouse lilies, and the last traces of Cuban cigar smoke. Outside, rain continued to tap softly against the tall windows while the grandfather clock chimed the passing hours with measured insistence. Mr. Charles Langley was the first to face the spotlight. He sat in a velvet armchair, his rough tweed jacket rumpled, fingers drumming on the polished mahogany armrest. When Poirot presented telephone records showing a call to a known black market dealer of rare manuscripts, Langley's face flushed. "It was merely research, I tell you, pure academic interest." His voice rose too quickly, the rehearsed confidence cracking like thin ice. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes sharp. "Research that conveniently coincides with the disappearance of a priceless Salter? Come now, monsieur." The performance of the generous patron grows strained. Mrs. Amelia Thorpe followed, her black velvet gown seeming heavier under the crystal chandelier's soft light. She accepted another glass of sweet liqueur, the taste turning bitter on her tongue as Poirot revealed evidence of a secret joint bank account linked to her spending habits and the missing manuscript. "These accusations are monstrous," she protested, yet her gloved hands twisted the crisp linen napkin until the fabric creased. The chill night air drifting from the terrace raised gooseflesh on her arms, which she no longer bothered to hide. Watch this performance carefully. The widow's grief, once so perfectly composed, now trembles at the edges. The mask slips. "Did you catch it, Doctor?" But Simon Vale's helpful expert role began to splinter when Poirot produced conservation tools from the laboratory that matched microscopic markings on the murder weapon. "Coincidence!" he exclaimed, his sandalwood cologne suddenly too strong in the warm room. Any number of people had access to those tools. His soft kid gloves were removed and twisted nervously between his fingers, the leather creaking softly. Too perfect an alibi earlier. Too quick with explanations now. Truth needs no such frantic rehearsal. Young Miss Clara Voss was summoned next. She stood near the fireplace, the comforting fire warmth contrasting with her pale face. When pressed about the burned letter, she admitted in a trembling voice that she had seen Mr. Thorpe arguing heatedly with Langley over the possible private sale of the manuscript. I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. "I thought it was none of my business." The tension rises. Someone will break character very soon. Miss Evelyn Hart's scene proved most revealing. Confronted with a witness who had seen her car still parked near the archives long after she claimed to have left, her smooth performance of the devoted assistant fractured. I returned briefly to collect some notes," she stammered, the Worth perfume no longer masking the faint sheen of perspiration on her brow. Her silk gown rustled as she shifted uncomfortably on the velvet settee. Poirot made a small expressive gesture with his hands. "Ah, but you see, mademoiselle, the little inconsistencies accumulate. One actor claims early departure, another mentions arguments never witnessed. A third offers expertise that now feels too convenient. The psychology, it is everything. Greed performing as scholarly passion, resentment performing as loyal friendship, fear performing as calm cooperation. Each suspect's mask grew heavier under the steady pressure, the elegant Art Deco surroundings now feeling less like a refined stage and more like a tightening trap. Inspector Japp watched from the doorway, the scent of his own cigarette mixing with the rich aroma of fresh coffee someone had brought in. The crystal glasses on the side table caught the firelight, their smooth surfaces reflecting distorted images of strained faces. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and arranged a small vase of lilies into perfect alignment. Rehearsed lines, they always falter eventually. Truth, mon ami, requires no rehearsal. It simply is. One by one the actors left the room, footsteps echoing differently now on the parquet floor, some hurried, some reluctant. The velvet curtains swayed gently in the draught. The fire crackled on, casting long shadows across cold marble and warm wood. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips. The confrontation reached its peak in the dimly lit rare books room where the crime had occurred. Tall shelves of leather-bound volumes stood like silent witnesses under the geometric Art Deco ceiling. The air carried the heavy scent of old leather, furniture wax, and the faint metallic trace of dried blood. A single crystal lamp cast long shadows across the polished mahogany desk, while cold marble floors chilled the night air seeping from the terrace door. Poirot gathered Mrs. and Amelia Thorpe alone under the pretext of a final clarification. She entered with her head high, black velvet gown rustling softly, sandalwood cologne trailing like a fragile perfume curtain. "I have told you everything, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but edged with strain. "This endless questioning is becoming cruel." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. He arranged 3 pens on the desk into perfect symmetry, with small, precise hands. "Madame, the time for polite performances has passed. Let us speak of truth." He presented the accumulated evidence calmly, the secret joint account in her name and Dr. Vale's, large withdrawals matching the value of the missing Salter, and letters proving their affair. "Your husband discovered the plan to sell the manuscript privately. He threatened exposure, not only of the theft, but of your relationship. That, madame, is why he died." Mrs. Thorpe's face remained composed for a moment longer, the perfect mask of the grieving widow. Then the performance shattered. Her shoulders slumped against the cold marble edge of a bookshelf. The handkerchief she clutched stayed unused as real, ugly sobs broke free, raw, gasping, no longer rehearsed. "He found the letters. He said he would ruin us both," she whispered, voice cracking. "Simon only wanted freedom for us. I never meant for Reginald to die. But when he confronted me here that night, waving the proof, I panicked. The paperweight was on the desk. It was so easy. One blow, and it was done." The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Her black velvet gown tore slightly at the seam as she collapsed into a chair, and the silk lining whispering against the velvet upholstery. Hot tears finally streaked her carefully applied makeup, running freely now. The chill night air from the terrace brushed her skin, raising gooseflesh she no longer tried to hide. The bitter taste of the sweet liqueur she had drunk earlier seemed to rise again in her throat. The director method, the performance. Earlier she had wept with technical perfection, handkerchief dabbing, shoulders shaking at exactly the right rhythm, voice trembling on cue. The tell. But now the tears were genuine, messy, uncontrollable. The earlier dry handkerchief stood in stark contrast to this flood. The eyes, once coldly controlled, now showed raw panic and relief mixed together. The psychology. I am reminded of the tragic case of the Spanish chest, where a wife performed perfect indifference toward her husband, while secretly consumed by obsessive love for another. She moved through society with cool elegance, silk gowns rustling, champagne glass steady in her hand, smiling at parties as if her marriage meant nothing. Yet Poirot noticed the small betrayals. how her hands clenched whenever her husband's name was mentioned, how her laughter rang too bright, too rehearsed. She had poisoned him slowly, all while playing the role of the modern, detached wife. The body cannot sustain such contradiction forever. Genuine emotion eventually erupts, trembling hands, a breaking voice, tears that will not be stopped. Here, Mrs. Thorpe's mask of dignified grief had hidden hatred and desperate love. The psychology reveals that hate can wear the costume of loyalty for a long time. But pressure strips the costume away. The little grey cells understand this eternal truth. No actor can perform forever when the heart knows the real lines. 152 words. The truth. Therefore, the murder was never about burglary. It was the elimination of a threat to her freedom and her affair. The staged break-in was merely the final costume. You see the psychology now, mon ami. Beneath the elegant widow performed a woman driven by obsession and fear. The crucial psychological insight hung in the air like the final note of a tragic aria. Hate can perform as loyalty, greed as grief, and love as cool indifference, until the mask slips completely and the true face emerges in all its rawness. Dr. Vale was brought in moments later. His face drained of colour as he saw Mrs. Thorpe's broken state. "Amelia," he began, but the words died. His helpful expert mask crumbled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The scent of his sandalwood cologne suddenly felt cloying in the warm room. Miss Hart, Langley, and Miss Voss watched from the doorway, their own performances frozen in shock. The fire in the adjacent room crackled on, casting flickering light across velvet curtains and cold marble. Rain continued its soft drumming on the windows. Poirot drew himself up to his full, still modest height, green eyes satisfied. The mask had fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. The rare books room, once the scene of calculated violence, now held only silence broken by genuine, unrehearsed sobbing. The elegant stage had revealed its final, unflattering truth. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The elegant facade of Eldridge Hall began to peel away as Poirot pulled back the velvet curtains of secrecy. In the quiet hours after Mrs. Thorpe's breakdown, hidden connections emerged like props dragged into the spotlight. The warm drawing room, once filled with the scent of hothouse lilies and strong continental coffee, now felt heavy with the bitter aftertaste of revealed truths. Rain still tapped gently on the tall windows, while the fire crackled low, casting long shadows across polished mahogany and cold marble floors. Past secrets spilled forth in a cascade of letters, ledgers, and reluctant confessions. Reginald Thorpe had been blackmailing Charles Langley for years over a series of minor forgeries Langley had commissioned to inflate the value of his private collection. Miss Evelyn Hart had known about the affair between Mrs. Thorpe and Dr. Vale for months. She had stayed silent in exchange for promises of promotion and a share of any profits from the stolen manuscript. Dr. Vale had supplied the heavy brass paperweight from his conservation laboratory, carefully wiping it before placing it back on the desk to stage the burglary. Young Miss Clara Voss, though innocent of the murder itself, had unwittingly helped by cataloguing the Psalter and noticing its sudden disappearance from the official records. The backstage of their relationship stood fully exposed. What had appeared as professional harmony was in reality a web of resentment, greed, and desperate love. Langley's generous patronage masked deep financial troubles. Mrs. Thorpe's elegant mourning hid relief at freedom from a controlling husband. Miss Hart's loyalty was purchased silence. Vale's helpful expertise concealed cold calculation. Reflection. Behind the elegant curtains of Eldridge Hall, motives hid like forgotten props in a dusty storage room. Greed performed as cultured patronage of the arts. Obsession wore the costume of scholarly dedication. Loyalty masked quiet resentment, and love twisted itself into something dark and possessive. Humans craft these masks not merely to fool the audience, but to survive the roles that society assigns them: the devoted wife, the loyal colleague, the generous benefactor, the innocent assistant. Yet backstage, the true selves clash in silence until the performance can no longer hold. I recall the intricate matter of the missing will, where an entire family performed perfect devotion while secretly circling like vultures around a dying uncle's fortune. They sat at his bedside with soft voices and gentle hands scented with expensive cologne, arranging flowers and reading aloud from his favorite books. The nieces wept with handkerchiefs pressed to dry eyes. The nephew spoke of "dear uncle" with just the right tremor in his voice. Yet Poirot noticed the small betrayals, how quickly they reached for the brandy decanter when the old man dozed, how their conversations turned to investments the moment they thought no one listened. One niece had forged the new will in a moment of panic, rehearsing her tears nightly in front of a mirror. The mask slipped only when Poirot offered her the uncle's favourite pipe. She recoiled not from grief, but from the scent of her own guilt still clinging to the stem. The body cannot lie as convincingly as the face. Genuine emotion disrupts the careful script. Steady hands and dry eyes always betray the actor. In that case, as here, the performance of family unity hid a theatre of greed and quiet hatred. 168 words. The universal truth is that every secret kept backstage eventually fuels a motive that steps into the lights. No curtain is thick enough to hide the human heart forever. The theatrical wisdom for you, dear listener, is this: before you applaud any grand performance, take a moment to peer behind the curtain. Look for the discarded props, the whispered arguments, the trembling hands when no one seems to watch. In the sophisticated world of Eldridge Hall, the elegant stage of learning and culture concealed a far darker drama. Poirot stood by the fireplace, the warm glow contrasting with the chill night air drifting from the terrace. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then arranged a small stack of letters into perfect symmetry on the mahogany table. The scent of sandalwood cologne still lingered faintly from Dr. Vale's earlier presence, now mixed with the rich aroma of fresh coffee someone had brought in to steady nerves. Miss Hart sat quietly in a corner, her silk gown no longer rustling with confidence. Charles Langley stared into the fire, his Cuban cigar extinguished and forgotten. The actors had dropped their roles, revealing the ordinary, flawed humans beneath the costumes. The velvet curtains swayed gently. The crystal chandelier tinkled softly overhead. Footsteps on the parquet floor sounded heavier now, no longer part of a rehearsed entrance. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The final act. The cast assembled in the grand reading room of Eldridge Hall as the final act began. Crystal chandeliers tinkled softly overhead, casting geometric patterns of light across polished mahogany tables and cold marble floors. The scent of hothouse lilies mingled with lingering cigar smoke and the rich aroma of strong continental coffee. A low fire crackled in the grate, its warmth contrasting the chill night air that slipped through the velvet curtains from the terrace. Rain continued its gentle drumming on the tall windows. Hercule Poirot drew himself up to his full height, still modest, yet commanding the stage completely. His green eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he surveyed the gathered troupe. When he adjusted his magnificent moustache with precision, small hands gesturing expressively. "Mesdames et messieurs, you have each performed for Poirot, some truthfully, some not. Let us review the performances, shall we?" He turned first to Miss Evelyn Hart, who sat rigidly in her champagne silk gown, the fabric rustling nervously. "Miss Hart, you played the devoted assistant with admirable dedication, the loyal colleague, always admiring her mentor. But devotion does not burn incriminating letters in the fireplace. Your knowledge of the affair and your silence in exchange for promotion, that was no loyalty. That was a supporting role in a larger crime." Hart's face paled. Her handkerchief twisted in her lap, the crisp linen creasing under trembling fingers. "Next, Poirot addressed Charles Langley, who clutched an unlit cigar, amid the faint scent of Cuban tobacco still clinging to his rough tweed jacket. "Mr. Langley, you performed the outraged patron so convincingly, the generous benefactor shocked by the loss of a priceless manuscript. Yet loyal patrons do not secretly contact black market dealers. Your financial troubles and the forgeries Reginald Thorpe discovered, these were strong motives to remove the man who held your secrets." Langley shifted uncomfortably, his heavy footsteps earlier now replaced by silence. Poirot turned to Dr. Simon Vale, whose soft kid gloves lay discarded on the table. "Dr. Vale, you played the helpful expert with such smooth expertise, the trusted friend offering medical insight. Helpful experts, however, do not supply the murder weapon from their own laboratory or conspire with a married woman to sell stolen treasures. Like your affair with Mrs. Thorpe provided both passion and profit." Vale's face remained stony, but his hands betrayed him, clenching and unclenching. The widow sat in black velvet, her earlier breakdown leaving her eyes red and raw. Poirot's voice softened slightly, yet remained firm. "Mrs. Amelia Thorpe, you performed the grieving widow with technical perfection at first. The elegant lady in mourning, shocked by her husband's violent end. Yet grieving widows do not conspire with lovers to eliminate a husband who threatened exposure. Your hatred performed as loyalty until the mask could hold no longer." Mrs. Thorpe looked down at the smooth crystal glass in her hands, the sweet liqueur now tasting only of bitterness. Poirot paused, letting the tension rise like a well-timed dramatic pause. The grandfather clock chimed softly in the distance. He made a small expressive gesture with his hands. "And so we come to our leading performer, Miss Clara Voss." The young junior cataloguer looked up in genuine surprise, her rough tweed skirt brushing the velvet settee. Poirot's green eyes fixed upon her. "You, mademoiselle, gave the most convincing performance of all. The innocent junior assistant, helpful, overlooked, slightly nervous but always cooperative. The shocked young woman who discovered nothing until the police arrived. Magnifique. You played the role with such natural hesitation, such careful restraint. But you made one small error, one tiny moment when the mask slipped completely. When you found Mr. Thorpe's body that night, you straightened the papers and pens on his desk with perfect order and method. A truly shocked person does not tidy a murder scene. They freeze. They cry out. They do not arrange objects symmetrically while claiming horror. That small revealing gesture betrayed you. The psychology of the moment was clear. Only the killer would instinctively restore order after the crime, driven by the same compulsion that led you to forge entries in the catalogue and plan the theft of the Psalter for your own private sale. Miss Voss's face drained of colour. Her hands trembled violently now, the performance of innocence collapsing entirely. You used the staged burglary as cover, striking Mr. Thorpe when he confronted you about the discrepancies you had created. The paperweight was convenient. The window was forced afterward. A clever performance, but the body does not forget its own actions, or the little grey cells see what the eyes miss. The room fell into absolute silence except for the crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of silk and velvet as the actors shifted in discomfort. Poirot's voice rose with quiet finality. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth, she takes her bow. Inspector Japp stepped forward with constables. Handcuffs clicked around Miss Clara Voss's wrists. The other suspects sat stunned, their masks stripped away, revealing ordinary, flawed human faces beneath the costumes of grief, loyalty, and innocence. The spotlight of truth had shone brightest on the unlikeliest performer. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The grand reading room of Eldridge Hall felt strangely hushed after the final revelation. Crystal chandeliers continued their soft tinkling overhead, casting flickering geometric patterns across the polished mahogany tables and cold marble floors. The fire in the grate had burned lower, its warm glow now subdued, while the scent of hothouse lilies mingled with the fading aroma of cigar smoke and the bitter edge of strong continental coffee left untouched in delicate cups. Rain still pattered gently against the tall windows, a steady rhythm that seemed to mark the end of the performance. Inspector Japp nodded to his constables as they led Miss Clara Voss away. The young woman walked with her head bowed, the rough tweed skirt no longer part of an innocent costume, but the simple clothing of a defeated actor. Her hands, once steady enough to tidy a murder scene, that now trembled visibly in the cold night air that drifted from the terrace door. The mask of the helpful junior cataloguer had been stripped away completely, revealing a face pale with shock and quiet resignation. Mrs. Amelia Thorpe remained seated in her black velvet gown, the fabric now creased and heavy. Her earlier raw sobbing had given way to a numb silence. The sandalwood cologne she wore seemed fainter, as if even her perfume had surrendered. She stared at the smooth crystal glass on the table, the sweet liqueur inside long forgotten. The performance of the elegant grieving widow had ended. What remained was a woman facing the consequences of hatred dressed as love and greed masked as freedom. Dr. Simon Vale stood rigidly near the fireplace, his soft kid gloves abandoned on a side table. The helpful expert who had offered medical opinions with such polished confidence now looked smaller, his rough tweed sleeves brushing the velvet settee as he shifted uncomfortably. The affair that had burned so brightly backstage now felt cold under the spotlight of truth. He avoided Mrs. Thorpe's eyes, the shared secret that had once bound them, now the chain that would drag them both into the courts. Charles Langley paced slowly near the tall windows, his Cuban cigar extinguished and forgotten in an ashtray. The wealthy patron who had performed generous concern so convincingly now moved with heavier footsteps on the parquet floor. His financial troubles and past forgeries, once hidden behind donations and arguments over security, lay fully exposed. The rough texture of his tweed jacket seemed coarser in the firelight, as a reminder that even the richest actor eventually steps off the stage without applause. Miss Evelyn Hart sat quietly in the corner, her champagne-coloured silk gown rumpled. The delicate Worth perfume no longer masked the faint sheen of nervous perspiration. Her performance of loyal assistant had crumbled when the burned letter and her knowledge of the affair came to light. She twisted a crisp linen napkin between her fingers, the fabric bearing the creases of her anxiety. Promotion and silence had seemed a small price backstage. Now it carried the weight of complicity. Poirot moved among them like a director after the final curtain, observing the transformations with quiet satisfaction. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then arranged a small vase of lilies into perfect symmetry on a side table. His small hands moved with order and method, bringing calm back to the elegant room. "The theatre of crime always ends this way," he said softly. The actors remove their masks. Some faces show relief, others show regret, a few show nothing at all. Yet the little grey cells know the truth has been spoken. Japp cleared his throat, the sound echoing off the wood-panelled walls. "We'll take statements properly at the station. The manuscript will be recovered, and the charges will be sorted. Murder, conspiracy, theft. It's a full house tonight." One by one, the suspects were escorted out. Mrs. Thorpe rose with quiet dignity, her black velvet trailing behind her like a fallen curtain. Vale followed without protest, his earlier helpful demeanour replaced by weary acceptance. Langley muttered something about his lawyers, but the bluster had faded. Hart walked with her head slightly lowered, the silk of her gown whispering a final, subdued rustle. The grand reading room slowly emptied. Footsteps faded along the parquet corridors. The velvet curtains swayed gently in the draught from the terrace. The grandfather clock chimed once more, its rich tone marking the true end of the evening's drama. No grand bows were taken, no audience clapped. The elegant Art Deco surroundings, once the perfect stage for refined performances, now stood as silent witness to justice beginning its slow, methodical work. Poirot stood alone for a moment near the desk where Reginald Thorpe had died. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and surveyed the scene with green eyes that missed nothing. The psychology of the entire drama lingered in the air, greed performing as cultural passion, where hate performing as loyalty, fear performing as innocence. Each actor had played their role until the spotlight grew too bright. The curtain call had come. The performances were over. No applause for this performance. Only justice. Chapter 9. After the show. The municipal archives of Eldridge Hall slowly returned to its former elegance in the weeks that followed the dramatic curtain call. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, catching on the geometric Art Deco plasterwork and crystal chandeliers that once again tinkled softly in the gentle breeze. The scent of fresh hothouse lilies and polished furniture wax replaced the heavier aromas of cigar smoke and tension. Polished mahogany tables gleamed once more, and the cold marble floors felt cooler underfoot, without the weight of suspicion hanging in the air. The rare books room had been carefully cleaned and restored, though a faint memory of leather bindings and old paper still lingered like the ghost of a final act. The transformations were quiet but profound. Miss Clara Voss, the once promising junior cataloguer who had played the innocent so convincingly, faced trial and conviction for the murder of Reginald Thorpe. Her forgery of the catalogue entries and planned private sale of the illuminated Psalter had been the spark that ignited the fatal confrontation. Behind bars, the young woman who had straightened papers with nervous precision now confronted the reality of her choices. The mask of the overlooked assistant had been replaced by the plain uniform of a prisoner, her rough tweed skirt exchanged for something far simpler and harsher. Mrs. Amelia Thorpe and Dr. Miss Simon Vale stood trial together as conspirators. Their affair, once hidden backstage in whispered meetings and secret letters, became public knowledge in the courtroom. The elegant widow in black velvet lost her refined composure as the evidence unfolded. The performance of grief gave way to the reality of shared guilt. Vale's helpful expert persona crumbled completely under cross-examination. Both received lengthy sentences, their love twisted by greed and desperation, now reduced to adjacent cells and distant visits. The sandalwood cologne and delicate Worth perfume no longer masked anything. Only the truth remained. Charles Langley avoided a murder charge, but faced serious consequences for his financial schemes and attempted black market dealings. His generous patronage of the archives, it once performed with such confident cigar smoke and tweed authority, was exposed as self-serving. The wealthy chairman quietly resigned his position, his rough tweed jacket now worn in quieter, less public settings. Financial penalties and social ostracism stripped away the mask of the benevolent benefactor, leaving a man forced to live with reduced means and damaged reputation. Miss Evelyn Hart fared better than most, though not unscathed. Her complicity through silence earned her a suspended sentence and dismissal from the archives. The devoted assistant who had burned evidence to protect her ambitions now worked in a smaller library in a neighbouring town. Her champagne silk gown and floral perfume were replaced by practical tweed and simpler scents. The experience had stripped her of illusions. She carried herself with a new, quieter honesty that had been absent during the original performances. The archives themselves transformed from a theatre of crime back into a peaceful sanctuary of learning. New staff arrived, carefully chosen for genuine dedication rather than ambition. The grand reading room once again hosted scholars and patrons, but with tighter security and clearer rules. The missing Psalter was recovered from a private collector and returned to its proper place under glass. Footsteps on the parquet floor now sounded lighter, unburdened by lies. The velvet curtains swayed gently without concealing secrets, and the fire in the grate crackled with simple warmth rather than dramatic tension. Poirot visited one final time before departing for London. He walked slowly through the restored halls, touching his magnificent moustache thoughtfully as he observed the changes. The psychology of the entire drama still fascinated him. how greed had performed as cultural passion, how hate had worn the costume of loyalty, and how fear had disguised itself as innocent nervousness. Each actor had been forced to remove their mask, revealing ordinary human faces beneath, flawed, frightened, and ultimately accountable. The setting that had once felt like a sophisticated stage for tragedy now breathed with quiet recovery. Hothouse lilies bloomed fresh in sleek vases. Strong continental coffee was served again in the staff pantry, its rich aroma welcoming rather than tense. The grandfather clock chimed with steady, unhurried tones. Even the chill night air from the terrace seemed milder, as if the theatre itself had exhaled after the final bow. In the quiet resolution, small personal transformations continued. One scholar, who had known Thorpe, began volunteering more hours, honouring the victim's dedication with honest work. A young assistant, inspired by the scandal, chose transparency over ambition in her own career. The lessons of masks and performances lingered in conversations long after the police had departed. Poirot stood on the terrace for a moment, the crisp air brushing his face. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and arranged a few fallen leaves into neat alignment on the stone balustrade. Order and method had been restored, both to the archives and to the truth. The elegant Art Deco building, once the perfect stage for deception and murder, had emptied of its tragic players. The drama had concluded, but its echoes would remain in the minds of those who had witnessed the fall of every carefully constructed role. The theatre emptied, the lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Hercule Poirot sat comfortably in his London apartment, the soft glow of a single Art Deco lamp illuminating the room. A steaming cup of tisane rested on the small table beside him, its herbal aroma rising gently in the warm air. Outside, the evening rain pattered softly against the windows, a familiar sound that reminded him of the night at Eldridge Hall. He had arranged the objects on his table with perfect symmetry: the tisane cup, a small notebook, and a fresh handkerchief, his small hands moving with the familiar order and method he cherished. The news from the archives had arrived that morning. As Miss Clara Voss had been convicted and sentenced for the murder of Reginald Thorpe, Mrs. Amelia Thorpe and Dr. Simon Vale received lengthy terms as conspirators in the scheme and the cover-up. Charles Langley faced financial penalties and social disgrace for his forgeries and attempted black market dealings. Miss Evelyn Hart, spared the worst, now worked quietly in a smaller library, her ambitions tempered by the scandal. The municipal archives had reopened peacefully, its elegant halls once again filled with scholars and the scent of leather bindings and fresh lilies. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, green eyes reflecting on the entire drama. "Ah, what a performance it was," he murmured to the empty room. "A perfect theatre of crime, staged in the most refined setting. Why do people choose to perform rather than simply reveal the truth?" In the case of Eldridge Hall, each actor wore a carefully chosen mask. Miss Voss played the innocent junior, helpful and overlooked, because society rewards the quiet, unassuming role. Mrs. Thorpe performed dignified grief to hide her relief and her affair. Dr. Vale wore the costume of the helpful expert to mask his cold calculation. Langley performed generous patronage to conceal his financial desperation and past crimes. Even Miss Hart cloaked her ambition in loyalty. Humans wear these masks because the world demands them. The perfect professional, the devoted spouse, the loyal colleague. To remove the mask is to risk judgment, rejection, or ruin. Yet the little grey cells know that no performance can be sustained forever, and the body betrays the actor. A dry handkerchief when tears are expected, steady hands when shock should tremble, an instinctive tidying of papers after violence. Guilt always leaves its mark in the small, unguarded moments. This truth is as old as human nature itself. I am reminded of the famous affair at Styles, where a seemingly devoted wife performed perfect concern for her ailing husband while slowly poisoning him with strychnine. She moved through the house with silk gowns rustling, poured tea with steady hands scented with expensive perfume, and spoke of her husband's health with just the right mixture of worry and affection. The family believed her completely until the mask slipped. One small error. She reached too quickly for the medicine bottle when the symptoms appeared, her hands betraying practiced confidence rather than genuine panic. The psychology was clear. Genuine love or grief disrupts order. Calculated murder maintains it. In that case, as in Eldridge Hall, the performance of devotion hid hatred and greed. The murderer forgot that truth needs no rehearsal, while lies always require perfect timing. 178 words. The psychology of revelation is equally fascinating. When the spotlight of truth shines, the actor cannot sustain the role. Mrs. Thorpe's mask fell completely in the rare book's room. From controlled widow to raw, sobbing woman, admitting panic and relief. Miss Voss's tidy desk gesture, so small and instinctive, exposed the killer who valued order even in violence. These moments prove that the human heart cannot lie indefinitely. Much society may force us to wear masks. The successful career woman, the respectable husband, the innocent young employee. But guilt presses from within until the performance cracks. The body knows what the mind tries to script. Trembling hands, a breaking voice, eyes that finally fill with real tears. In the end, truth triumphs over performance because truth is simple. It requires no costume, no rehearsed lines, no supporting cast. Lies demand constant maintenance, alibis to remember, emotions to fake, glances to control. Eventually the actor forgets a line, the mask slips, and the audience, or in this case, Hercule Poirot, sees clearly. The theatre of Eldridge Hall taught this lesson beautifully. Behind every elegant role lay ordinary human motives: greed for money, desire for freedom, fear of exposure. Once the curtain fell, the actors stood revealed as they truly were, flawed and accountable. Poirot sipped his tisane, the warm liquid comforting against the chill memories of the case. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and leaned back with satisfaction. The psychology, it is everything. People perform because they fear the audience's judgment, yet the true audience, the careful observer, always sees through the costume. Watch the small gestures, mon ami, the dry eye, the steady hand, the over-tidy desk. These are the moments when the theatre crumbles and truth steps forward. He gazed out at the rain-streaked window, where the lights of London twinkled like distant stage lights. The lessons of this drama would linger. How greed performed as scholarly passion, hate as loyalty, and innocence as careful restraint. And that each suspect had entered the stage with confidence, only to exit stripped of their roles. The theatre of life demands many performances, Poirot reflected. Society writes the script, and we learn our lines well. But eventually, every actor forgets. The body rebels. The voice cracks. The hands tremble when they should not. And in that moment, truth takes its final bow. He set the tisane cup down with precise care, aligning it perfectly with the edge of the table. A small smile touched his lips. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot watches always.